Hi everyone, welcome to this fireside chat sponsored by IABC Philadelphia, New Jersey, and Lehigh Valley. Our program today is Optimizing Your Career in the Midst of COVID-19 with Executive Coach Ed Samuel. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Steve Lubetkin, Managing Partner of the Lubetkin Media Companies and President of Technology for IABC Philadelphia. I'm producing today's show and pushing the buttons, and if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll go through those later in the program with Ed. Now let me start by introducing our moderator for today's conversation, Rick Alcantara. Rick is Vice President of Communications for the Philadelphia chapter of IABC, and he's also Executive Communications Director for Princeton Strategic Communications, where he advises clients on crisis communications readiness. Rick also advises his own clients on public relations, social media marketing, and digital communications. Earlier in his career, Rick founded Tara Communications LLC, led social media marketing for USI Affinity, and directed employee communications consulting for Future Tech Consulting. He's a past president of the Philadelphia chapter of PRSA and a former instructor at Rowan University. He's a member of PRSA's Counselors Academy and the St. Andrew's Society of Philadelphia. Rick has a master's degree in public relations from Rowan University and a bachelor's degree from Susquehanna University, also in communications. It's with great pleasure that I turn things over to Rick Alcantara.
Steve, and welcome everyone to IABC's December webinar, Optimizing Your Career in the Midst of COVID-19. I'm your host, Rick Alcantara, and with me today is author, executive coach, radio personality, and longtime friend, Ed Samuel. Welcome, Ed. For those of you who don't know Ed, he's the founder of Sam Nova Inc., a company in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, that provides one-on-one coaching to business leaders from mid-level managers to senior executives. His team works with people who are in job transition, looking to advance their career or seeking to start a business or a consulting practice. Over the last 14 years, Ed has led over 150 networking forums with over 3,000 executives. He's been a guest speaker with numerous regional groups, including Chem Pharma, FANG, BNI, Philadelphia Area Greater Careers Group, and various chambers of commerce. On his Saturday mornings, Ed hosts Optimize Your Career, a weekly radio show on Philadelphia's WFYL. Ed began his career with Digital Equipment Corporation, where he spent 19 years in accounting and customer operations. He was later a general manager for the StrideRight Corporation, VP of Operations, and CFO for two high-tech venture firms, and led recruiting for W.L. Gore's medical business unit before launching his career coaching practice. Now, I have known Ed for many years and honestly can say that he is one of the most knowledgeable individuals I've ever met on the career front. He's helped hundreds of folks in the Delaware Valley, including some of my friends and business colleagues, find jobs and advance their careers. He even helped me earlier in my career. His experience as a former corporate recruiter helps job candidates navigate the hidden job market, build solid resumes, and improve their interviewing skills. I'd also like to mention that later in this program, we're going to be giving away a copy of Ed's book, Optimize Your Resume, Do's and Don'ts, the Sam Nova Way. But before we really jump into it, I want to mention again what Steve had said earlier, that we will be taking your questions. We'll ask you to post them in the Q&A function, and after Ed finishes his remarks, we'll address your questions. So, Ed, the coronavirus has turned the job market completely upside down. There's like millions of people out of work, companies have closed their doors, and networking has become increasingly difficult. So despite all of that, people are still finding new jobs and new career paths. So I have to ask you, what's their secret?
Well, I'm going to be getting into several different areas, and one thing I'm going to hit on is the people that tend to be a bit more flexible right now in this COVID market tend to do a little bit better, and flexibility means a different path, perhaps a little bit different twist to their career, a little bit different job, perhaps. The more flexible people are, that seems to be helping. People tend to be getting hired also in industries that tend to be more defensive in nature. And there are some industries to stay away from, and there are some that I would encourage you to look at, in a more aggressive way. So I'll be talking about kind of both of those things and covering some basics in my talk here at lunchtime. Okay, so I want to start off with, let's go to the first slide, or the next slide, please. Yeah, I want to start off with talking a bit about the industries that tend to have positive movement right at this moment, and there's certainly the industries that have been affected away from it. This is where I see positive movement. I see finance and tax. I see positive things happening, and certainly the tax season coming about. Technology continues to seem to be strong. Certainly, if you have depth in selling certain technologies and solutions, that seems to be a place to be. Distribution, of course, and tied to Amazon wanting to hire 100,000 people. Digital marketing is taking off. It's becoming a kind of an embedded industry in itself now from a marketing standpoint. In fact, many of the marketing roles that you'll see posted, it's requiring digital marketing as a requirement. That seems to be taking off. Recruiting. It's one of the pleasant surprises for me, unlike the 2008 recession recovery, is that I see more recruiting positions posted today than I had ever saw in that recovery in 2009, 2010. And I'll actually be talking about a client who actually moved into recruiting a little bit later. Defense contracting, of course, that could change with the new administration coming in, but that tends to be, I see growth there. Pharma chemical continues to be strong, cautious but strong. I see engineering continuing to improve, although I do see some firms, some organizations moving to 1099 engineers. I haven't seen that happen as frequently, but I see some movement there. Anything to do with healthcare, quite honestly, personal care. I have access to some amazing job banks. Retirement communities, I'm seeing some movement there, positive movement, and real estate and mortgage is a little bit off the charts right now. A lot of realtors, they just can't find people fast enough. And then I see, again, positive movement in automotive. So these are some areas I see positive movement, and if you're looking for a job, these areas might be something you want to go focus in on a little bit, in a little bit, finer way. Certainly, entertainment, again, is getting hit really hard. I think most of you heard about Disney laying off 32,000 people in the next week or two. That's going to be hit pretty hard. But these are the areas, to kind of look at a little bit more than the others. Now, slide, please. Now, when we talk about, COVID-19 and what we're going through, before I start talking about some specific things that you need to do differently or focus in on, I kind of thought about an analogy. If you were taking a cross-country trip, from New York to LA, and it was your career journey, and it was a smooth ride. What do you want to make sure you have in place? But with COVID-19, there's going to be all kinds of holes and bumps in the road, and I like to hit on what I would consider the foundational things of a job search strategy that I like to see people focus in on, and then we could talk about additional things to do in the midst of COVID-19. Because if the foundation's shaky, then trying to do some of the things I'm going to talk about in a few minutes become even harder. So let me kind of go through them. And here's the first 5. The first one is apply for jobs. So and as a career coach, I'm always saying, apply for a job, but try to limit the time you spend to about 90 minutes, no more than 90 minutes a day on a job board, and make sure when you apply for a job, you're meeting the minimums, minimum requirements. If you start spending more than 90 minutes, then it starts to become actually unproductive time in a job search, believe it or not, because you need to be doing the other things I'm going to be mentioning here this afternoon. Second item, wait for and engage a recruiter. Now, up to the age of 49 years of your life in business, 20% of you will get hired by a recruiter in some way, shape, or form. So that 20%, it's a good percentage. And you can wait for a recruiter to contact you. And if you're doing all the things right, it's a beautiful thing when they reach out to you. I was a recruiter, and when you're the person, you become my best friend, and I stay with you, and I get you landed. It's a beautiful thing. But once you turn to age 50, that 20% goes to as low as 7 or less percent. So what I always worry about is when people put all their hopes and aspirations in bullet number 2 in terms of landing that next job. And that includes senior executives that I work with. Sometimes we put way too much focus on that. But yet, it's something to look at. Now, here's another one. Number 3, you apply for a job, you meet the mins, you apply, and then you leverage your network to kind of pull you forward in the process. It's a beautiful thing if you can make that happen. You might apply at a firm, and you might know somebody at that firm, and they might help advance your resume to the hiring manager. And as a result, you might get asked to interview. So that's a great strategy. Now, if your network is weak and you don't know many people, that becomes a much harder strategy to do. So here's number 4, engage your network before applying at a firm. Now, that means you have to do some homework. You have to actually figure out who the hiring manager might be. And then leverage your network to get to that person and then apply for a job. And there's some pluses and minuses to that. But generally speaking, that's a strategy you can certainly use. Now, here's number 5. Number 5, go to networking events, that really support people in job transition. And at those networking events, you might get warm or semi-warm leads. It could be financial executive networking group. It could be career professionals executive networking group, or it could be Philadelphia, great careers group. But these are networking forums that, and it could be cross-functional, cross-industry, but they're there to help you get leads, get warm leads at targeted firms. And if you're not a member of any type of networking forum, then I think it's a mistake when you're in job transition. So let's go to the next slide. So here are the next 5 to round things out. So number 6 is one that we tend not to do sometimes, and that's if you're in supply chain, you might want to go to a really specific job board that deals with nothing but people in supply chain, and it's a good place to post your resume on. It's also a good place to look for jobs at. If you're a senior executive, ExecuNet is a great job board to take a look at, especially if you're making $175,000 and above. But beyond the Indeeds of the world, the Monsters, the Career Builders, there are very specific job boards for everyone on this call that's aligned to your industry. And some of these job boards will profess that they're the first to post a job, and it's a great way for employers to kind of hone in on that. I know at W.L. Gore, I used a specialty job board for a very unique role, and we ended up landing some really great candidates by using those specialty job boards. Now, number 7, go to specific networking events. So again, if you're in supply chain, if you're in tax, the National Association of Tax Professionals, go to at least one event or be part of a forum or an organization where they're meeting and you're rubbing shoulders with your peers. And by rubbing shoulders with your peers, you might be rubbing shoulders with your future leaders, future managers, and potentially giving you access to people that you really need to talk to. Don't go to all of them because you can't. It's not a good use of your time, but try to pick one that's tied to your industry that you specialize in. Now, here's another one. It seems so simple, so fundamental. Leverage your formal LinkedIn network. And statistically, believe it or not, if you have 100 people in your network, statistically, you might only really leverage 5% of it. and maybe it's 7% on the high end. But a lot of us will not leverage the entire network, and it's hard, and it's not easy, but it's something that I see people make the mistake all the time, where you're not leveraging that network to its fullest. Now, number 9 is one that I'm a big fan of. In fact, I'll be speaking on that topic in a few weeks, and for an hour all by itself, and that's the hidden job market. And this is when you start knocking on doors, building new relationships, and a byproduct of all that work means that it might lead to a job opportunity that leads to an interview, to you landing that job and a job offer. And I'll talk a little bit more about the hidden job market, but it's a very specific effort on your part to make sure you attack it. I know one employer that 50+% of who they hire is because people were knocking on their doors to the hidden job market. 50%. This is $1 billion company. The numbers are staggering, and I've seen it firsthand. And then here's number 10. Number 10 is, part of this foundational work that you do is make sure that if you're unemployed, if you're in transition, or even if you're working, looking to make this next step, always take some time to do some type of formal assessment. Make sure you're kicking the tires. Make sure that you're not missing an opportunity to bring you to a better place. That type of an assessment work is so important, especially if you don't like what you're doing, what you've been doing. So these 10 areas that I'm going through, these are foundational. And if you're in a job search and you want to advance your career, be thinking about these 10 things and kind of moving them all forward at once, and not getting honed in on, focused in on one specific or 2 or 3 areas. Because what I'm going to talk about next, because of COVID-19, makes all our efforts harder. But if that foundation's not strong, we run into some problems. Now, let's go to the next slide. I want to detour a little bit before I get into the 18 specific areas to focus in on, just to talk about networking and a few do's and don'ts. My next book that I'm writing is actually Networking to the Fourth Power. It's because networking is so important. It's important for optimizing your career. It's important for getting back to work. It's important to the things that you do out of work. It becomes important. So and if you're running a small business, it's important. But here are some mistakes that I've seen, which I would caution you to be careful of. And the first one is, when it comes to networking, use the 90% rule of networking. And that rule is this. 90% of the time, your next job is going to be because of not who you're directly connected to, but who that person knows or is connected with. And many times what I see happening when it comes to networking is people will only want to network with their buds or people that they know well. And then there's a bunch of people they don't network with, but yet those people that they don't network with actually are connected to the very people you need to get access to. So this rule, 90% of networking, it's fundamental to why some people have very, very low numbers when it comes to networking, and some people have very high numbers when it comes to networking. And I'm not professing you should be, connecting to everybody, but maybe I am to some degree. Now, number 2 is, when you build out your formal network, and this is kind of a part 2 of what I just said. Just remember, when you're building a network, there's 3 parts to it, or 3 groups of people you can really connect with, right? One is your best buds. These are the people you've worked with. These might be your managers. It could be a series of different people, but these are, your best friends, your really good friends. And they could, that you've known over multiple companies. Then there's another group of people called coworkers, and coworkers, it's huge. It's a huge number. A lot of times I'll see people not connecting with coworkers to the extent that they should. And then lastly, acquaintances, a gigantic number. And these are people that know you know them. You should be connected to those people on LinkedIn. I'm working with someone now, very recently who, their network connections, let's just say they're, 100 people. They know 100 best buds in their 25-year career, let alone, 500 coworkers at their last company they worked at. So again, be careful. Build your network with those three groups. Here's number three. Number three, please be strategic when you're networking. This is for a much longer discussion, but use your ACE cards wisely. Sometimes I'll see someone leveraging their network and they're not using their ACE card wisely. And be very careful when you use an ACE card. An ACE card is a really key person you want to get to. And you want to make sure that the person you're asking for help at that company really knows that person. And because some people, as an example, I would never ask, to forward your resume to that person because they're not at the right level. They might get it to HR, but they wouldn't, they wouldn't at that level. Then other people at a more senior level or a different level might be able to get it to that person. So just be careful when you're engaging your network. Think it through and go slow. Number four, there's networkers out there that I call intrinsic networkers. These are also known as open networkers. I'm an open networker. But just remember, an intrinsic networker, here's the bottom line. They're basically willing to share with you their network. And many times open networkers will have thousands and thousands of people they're connected to. They want to connect with you. Sometimes, most of the time, they don't want anything. Their argument is, look, I'm going to offer you my network. And if it can help you in some way, great. If it can't help you, okay, it can't help you. But I might need help 2 years from now, a year from now. So please don't shy away from intrinsic networkers, especially open networkers, if they want to connect with you. Because remember, if you use that 90% rule, it's going to come back to bless you because it's who they're connected to that might be your next boss. Number five, it sounds simple, but when you're starting to build a strategic network with anybody when it comes to networking, start slow. I made mistakes in the past where I started fast and they never really ended well or turned out well. Start slow. Try to do one thing together and do it well and see if there's a win-win in that relationship. And there are some people that call the relationships strategic when it's a take transaction. There's nothing strategic about it, and that's okay. What drives me crazy is when somebody says it's a strategic relationship and it's only a take transaction. And it's okay to be a take transaction, but just call it that, right? When you're working with, when they're working with me or you. And then here's number six. This again seems fundamental, but it's a mistake that made. Make sure every day, every week, every month, there should never be a time, even now, on a weekly basis where you're not meeting somebody new, at least one person new. And if you're unemployed and you're looking for a job and you go a week and you haven't met one new person, then I would say something's broken in your networking strategy. You're not part of a networking forum. And again, you don't want to go to a networking forum where the same six people show up every month. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you go to a networking forum. The one that I happen to lead in Newark, Delaware, I get a 40 to 50% turn on new people attending every month. Sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more. But the point being is that when people come to a networking event, they're going to meet new people. Do's and don'ts. It kind of goes back to some foundational things you want to make sure you take care of. Because now when we kind of overlay all of this with COVID-19, we have to do some more. So let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to cover 18 things that I would have to do and be very focused on. And I'll talk about some successes that have occurred because of these 18 strategies. So here's the first one. Rick asked the question earlier when we started out, hey, what's going on and what's making a difference? I put one for a reason, be open, in three key areas. Be open to new positions, be open to different, and even be open to new industries. Now, look, if you get in your job at a firm, just like the one you left in the industry, go back to work, it's a beautiful thing, and I'm all in, and I think it's great. But what happens is that if we put all our eggs in that basket, it may not be the best strategy during COVID-19. It's not. I've seen success after success after success this year with my own clients, let alone people that I've worked with in networking forums where they've made those shifts. So I'm begging you to create some flexibility. You might be very surprised. Now, the other thing, earlier in 2020, a networking forum had asked me to compare the 2008 recovery to what we're going through now in terms of this recovery. And it was startling, some of the things that I saw happening in this recovery that happened in 2008. Some things are very different that didn't happen in 2008, and I'll hit on these as I go. But don't be surprised if you're not called back or rehired. And unfortunately, what happened in 2008, many firms used the crisis to increase productivity. Certainly at your expense, our expense, right? But remember, we're a capital-driven marketplace, and that for some firms, hey, we're letting people go home. Hey, we're going to bring you back. Well, guess what? A lot of people aren't being asked to come back. I get phone calls usually every week and a half. Ed, I was not rehired. What do I do now? So don't necessarily put all your eggs in, hey, they're going to call me back basis, even now. The other thing that's happening, again, is the companies are using this opportunity to not bring you back. And it's a way for them to increase productivity. And for the people that remain at the companies, great stress is put on them because they're being asked to do way more than what might normally be expected, and then they throw the fear factor in, and the next thing you know, you're spending a lot of time working. In fact, I do know an engineer within the last week who that really happened to their company. They let people go, and they asked the people to remain to basically double the workload. And that particular person that I knew literally resigned. Said, I won't do double the work for the same pay, and I want to do double the work even if you double my pay, because you completely thrown out of whack the work-life balance. So anyway, this is just be careful. Now, number 3, avoid anything drastic like a 50% pay cut. There's downward pressure on compensation. In fact, I just read a report within the last week that you're going to see going into 2021 firms rationalizing downward reductions in pay up to 30%, 10%, 5%, 10%, 15%. So, but don't do anything drastic. Take a job where you're actually going to reduce your total compensation by 50%. Work with a career coach, work with me, work with somebody else, but try to do whatever you can to keep that market value as close to what you make or what you have made. And in some cases, you could even make more, but just be careful, because I've gotten a few phone calls in the last 2 or 3 months where hey, Ed, what do I do? This recruiter says I'd be perfect for this job, but it's going to pay half. Now, the other one is to expect temporary pay cuts. Some of those took place earlier this year. Some of those came back. Some of them have remained. So this idea of temporary pay cuts will continue. Someone most recently took a job, had a job offer. It was 25% less than market value because everybody at the company is taking a 25% pay cut, including you as a new employee are taking a 25% pay cut. And that's going to be your salary as you start. So if this happens to you, please understand that's just, the lay of the land as we're working through this COVID-19 dilemma that we're in. So number five, a lot of, something happened in 2008 that is happening now. if you find yourself unemployed, if you find yourself working and you're at great risk, if you find yourself maybe you're unhappy, maybe it's time to make a career pivot. And a career pivot is where you just take a deep breath and you're going to reevaluate your life, your career, do an assessment, really think it through, and then make that pivot. In 2008, and that whole job market recovery, there were some people who lost their careers, their jobs, and they were forced to make a career pivot. Well, if you're forced to make a career pivot, well, then you're forced to make one. Some of that's happening this year. And think about the people in entertainment. They're out of work for 9 months, and they want to move a career forward, but maybe entertainment, they can't wait it out another year or two. So they're being almost forced to make that career pivot. It's something that you need to do, but talk with a professional, talk with an assessment consultant to really think it through well. So here's number 6. Number 6, be open to contract or temp, contract to hire. Be open to it. And I know some of you, if you're out of work, you want to get back to work, you want that permanent role. But if given the opportunity, if something comes at you and it's a temp role, my argument would be more to take it than not take it. And many times a contract role can turn into a perm hire. I know many, many success stories during COVID-19 where people have been asked to come in as temp and they converted to perm this year. So again, you be flexible in thinking about doing that, especially if you've been out for more than 6 months. Really get flexible in doing that. Next slide, please. So here's a few more. Attack the hidden job market. Again, double down on it, in fact. In fact, I would argue that during the hidden job, going after the hidden job market is even more important because those are relationship-driven activities that then move you forward to get ahead of the curve, get ahead of even the job getting posted. So let me just give you one example of the hidden job. Some people will say, well, Ed, what's the hidden job market? Well, the hidden job market is that, when I was a CFO, people would call me, and I didn't know them from Adam. They'd call me and say, hey, Ed, I want to talk to you. Hey, Ed, here's my resume. And they would be professionally persistent, and they would even annoy me at times. And then finally, I actually looked at the resume. Finally, they got me on the phone, and I looked. I said, oh, my goodness, this is exactly what we need. Oh, my goodness, it's in my budget. Oh, my goodness, let's take down the 2 positions that we've posted that we're interviewing for, and let's put this position up and bring this person in because this is a much more difficult role to fill, and we were planning on doing it next quarter. Let's move it up to this quarter. See, that's an example of the hidden job market. And see, if you never have a conversation with anybody, you never get ahead of it if you're waiting for the job to get posted on the internet. So my argument is double down, but going after the hidden job market is more work. It's not easy. Way easier to apply for jobs online, go to networking events, wait for a warm lead. Hidden job market's hard. It's not for the faint of heart, and there's some training that you have to go into, and you have to do things well, and everything has to be done well for it to be effective. Now, consultants expect continued downward pressure on hourly rates due to the virtual delivery of work. I work with a lot of consultants. I help people start consulting practices, many. But what's happening with this whole notion of virtual delivery, you see a couple things playing out. One is you see people that used to charge $4,000 a day to deliver training. Well, guess what? Their rate is almost getting cut in half because companies are making the argument, hey, you're not getting dressed up flying out to Chicago and doing the training and doing all this work. Everything's virtual. I don't expect you to be charging the same hourly rate. So you see downward pressure and reductions in rates. You also see a slowdown in consulting overall right now. A lot of the bigger firms are maintaining some of their big clients, but a lot of the smaller projects are being put on hold. A lot of slowdown has happened in the consulting ranks, but I see signs that it's picking up as well. Now, number 9 continues to happen. And that's you get called for an interview, and next thing you know, you're going through this interview, and come to find out, there's no quick decision. There's going to be no fast decision to hire you. All they're doing is creating some pools of people so that when a decision is made to hire, they're going to go pull the trigger. So mass, the people you're talking to, is there what's the timing? What's the criticality? When will a decision be reached? Or is this more of a screening to build a candidate pool? I would be that forward right now in the COVID period and ask that question to anybody who's asking you to interview. And they're either going to give you an honest answer or they're going to lie, or they're going to say they don't know, but ask the question. The most important point is that you don't put all your hopes in to any one singular interview, because I've seen some amazingly crazy, slow things happening with my clients and other people when it comes to interview, and then wait, and wait even more. And some of even some of the larger multi-billion-dollar companies tend to still start. They still move like dinosaurs, which I just don't understand. Now, number 10. Look. The world of virtual work is changing, and you're going to see this being a long-term movement. Everything that I'm reading, everything that I'm seeing is that this shift to virtual work, even when a vaccine comes about, I don't think it's ever going to be back to the way it was. I think you're going to see a more of a permanent shift to a certain degree. Companies like the Harris Corporation down in Florida, a defense contracting company, they posted a role that would have been unheard of years ago to do this work remotely. I know because I used to recruit for Harris. I know them well. Just unheard of, which would tell me, and it's an indicator that you're going to see more and more senior level roles breaking for remote work on a more permanent basis. Now, number 11, it sounds simple, but get good at virtual interviewing. It's just a norm. And some people are good at it. Some people are less good at it. Some people need to practice. But here's the one statistic that I just want to share with you. A marketing organization down in DC did this study 3 years ago, and I always remember it because it had such an impact on me, that when it comes to building a relationship with anybody, especially someone that you don't know, let alone a potential future boss that you're interviewing with, your body language, your appearance, your energy, how you speak, everything about you has about a 75% impact of whether that relationship's going to move forward or not. So if you think about virtual interviewing, no different than face-to-face interviewing, we got to get really, really good at it. And I think it's going to be around for a while. Now, number 12 seems simple, but I caution my clients to bring the human element into every discussion. And I don't care if it's a recruiter, I don't care if it's the hiring man, I don't care who it is. Just ask a simple question. Hey, how you doing in the midst of COVID-19? You okay? Your family okay? Just do a check-in and not just go blowing right into your career, your job search. Spend a minute, because you'll be surprised. You hear about these, 7 degrees of separation. Well, today, because of LinkedIn and networking, it's probably only about a 3-degree separation where we know about people impacted. But show a little bit of the human side. I think it's to your advantage to do so. Let's go to the next slide. So here are the next few before we get to the end one. So number 13, the bread and butter foundationally, your resume has to stand out. It's got to be better than most. We're in an incredibly competitive environment. Even though the unemployment rate, I think as of October was 6.9%, still very competitive, a lot of risk out there. And because I do talks for 2 hours by itself just on resume, and I wrote a book on it, right? I could just tell you the one thing that happens for me that stands above everything is that first page is everything, and that first page has to be a home run. On average, you have about 7 seconds to 7.5 seconds for a person to make a decision on your resume. And if that first page is not a home run, you get moved to a different pile. I had some of the best recruiters in the world, literally in the world, hands down at W.L. Gore. and I watched them. It just was amazing. 3 piles. Yes, maybe, no. The no's were pretty fast. Yes. And then I looked at, the yeses, and they had a certain thing to them. And it quite, I've seen this firsthand over the years, let alone the recruiting that I did personally. LinkedIn has to be razor sharp. 75 to 80% of all hiring, especially for salaried workers. And you're actually seeing it, there's an increase occurring in the hourly workers. Your LinkedIn has to be razor sharp. I'm speaking tonight at a forum at 7 o'clock on the top 7 things to do for LinkedIn. But one of those 7 is making sure that you have solid LinkedIn recommendations. I just can't stress it enough. If I talk to somebody, hey, I've been out of work for X period of time, and I see you have one recommendation and it dated back to 2006, and you're going up against another candidate, and that person has 15 recommendations from 2006 to 2010 to 12 to 18 to last year to the last job. Do not underestimate the impact a LinkedIn recommendation will have, especially when you're going after the hidden job market. But please spend some time on that. So number 15, over the years, I've been the type of career coach where, hey, I know you got let go on Friday, you spent the weekend, now it's Monday, Tuesday, take a deep breath, let's get back to work, right? And I probably haven't spent as much time on the issue of resilience over the years that I should have. And I know for many of you who have been out of work for 6 months, a year and a half. I have people come to me that have been out of work for 2 years. And I've been out of work. I've been laid off from corporate America. I know what resilience is, but Stanley Green does a great job of giving everybody kind of a dose of resilience in tough times and some training and some ways to think through it and some actions to take. I encourage you, if you haven't been to one of Stanley's nationwide calls, text Stanley and get on one. There's going to be one Wednesday morning, tomorrow morning at 7:30 and at 9:30 at night. They're live, 30 minutes, they're free. And a lot of good things happen on those calls. I attend them for myself personally, let alone I recommend all my clients attend Stanley's calls. And there's no revenue share going back and forth. This is just something I believe in. Now, number 16, if you're not working, it's perfectly okay to get some part-time income coming in. Do whatever you have to do. I had a client of mine who, senior level person, every other day he was flipping a house with a buddy that he knew. He ended up landing a job. But do whatever you need. None of that has to go on LinkedIn. None of it has to go on your resume, but do what you need to do. And even once you get a job, I'm a big fan of having that secondary source of income. Now, 17 is something that, again, is a phenomenon that's happened because of COVID-19. Before COVID-19, there was a site called flexjobs.com. I actually interviewed one of the principals on my radio program a few years ago. And they would profess that, hey, we have jobs, you can do them anywhere in the country. The company could be based in California, you could be in Philadelphia, it doesn't matter. Great. Now, since COVID-19, there's a job board out there. There's a link called careersidekick.com, and that will list 13 job boards that have been created that compete with FlexJobs now. And their contention is half of the jobs on those job boards are mid to senior level roles now. So do not think that just because we're in the greater Philadelphia region, if you will, take a look at those boards, because your next job might just be remote and your next boss might be in Louisiana, and they just might hire you. So be a little bit flexible in that. And I've seen some good things happen. Next slide, please. So here's the last one, number 18. This is hard. But when I did my review of 2008 versus this recovery, one of the things that I read about, I studied, I looked at, is that during this time period, if you're out of work for a long period of time, And, long is relative, right? Sometimes being out a month feels long, but let alone 6 months, a year and a half. But if you can take that time to differentiate yourself, continue to improve, be resilient. If you can wait it out, do something to get better, sharper, faster, stronger, good things, really good things will tend to come your way. If you use this time to get slower, get beaten down, get weaker, show less energy, and it's easy to do, it's a harder play. I'm just making an argument. I've seen enough success stories that for those who really use this time wisely, and you're able to do it, and some people can't do it, and I understand that financially, but if you can wait it out, some really good things can happen for you. So let's go to the next slide. Here's just a few success stories as I wind things down. These are all clients. Here's a person in entertainment, 7 years, looking for a job, 9 months. He approaches me on February 15th, right before COVID hit. But what we did is we said, you know what? Let's do an assessment. What makes sense for you to do? And what came out the other end, believe it or not, is a much longer story, is he became a recruiter, revamped his resume greatly, focused on transferable skills. He attacked the hidden job market. Reached out to 70 contacts, got 15 responses, 4 interviews, 3 job offers, and 1 offer just too late. And he took it, and he's doing very well. Now that's a textbook everything. He did exactly what I had asked him to do, quite amazingly. Now, some people, it's not that easy. Some people, including my clients, they could be out a year before they land. But that's a person that, said, hey, I'm going to be flexible. What else can I do, even though I like entertainment? Here's another person, financial services, 25 years, New York City, client. But he leveraged an acquaintance, not a best bud. And that was his thinking up to this point. He leveraged his entire network, happened to be an acquaintance. Next thing you know, he's doing a contract work in education, and he's from financial services. Makes no sense. He did it anyway. Yes, take the job. What ended up happening was he showed that he has some staying power. He's doing some consulting. Next thing you know, he's working at a nonprofit. The net of it, he's now a senior manager reporting for this very large nonprofit. And he called me the other day saying, Ed, I never knew there was life on the outside of financial services. Here's another person, financial services industry in New York City, another client, actually northern New Jersey. He shifted his industry focus. And here's the net of it. Amazon ended up hiring him as a senior FP&A role and to do analysis work on warehouses. He has no understanding of warehouses at all, but they hired him because of his values, because of his authenticity and what he brought to the table. Much longer story, which I'll be talking about in a few weeks. Here's the last one, food production. Somebody food production, 20 years. We did an assessment. And I went out of the food production industry. I like what I do in operations, but I want to take a different slant at it. Bottom line is he had 2 job offers within 90 days. And now he's landed with what I would consider a wholesale business, B2B business that's just going gangbusters. So those are just some successes. Let's go to the next slide. Rick's going to talk about my resume book, but if anybody is on this call, they want my resume book, I will give a $5 rebate if you're registered and listening today on the book. And I could tell you of 400 some positive comments, 90% of them will say easy to use, easy to apply, practical, step by step. Let's hit the next slide. All I want to say is I'm speaking at about 5 or 6 different places, including something tonight. If you go to my website and just click on events, you're going to see all the events, including this particular one coming up next week with my friend Fazoon Kamal about doing a career pivot, an encore career. And last slide, Steve. And I encourage the people on this call, if you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, I have close to 24,000 connections. Please connect with me. And Rick will open it up.
Great. You've had some amazing ideas and some amazing tips and strategies. And definitely, I have a question for you too. But first, before we dive into that, we do want to give away a copy of your book. So I'm going to ask Steve Lebetkin, our producer, to just draw a name at random from a list of attendees today and see who's the lucky winner. And can't hear you, Steve.
I said you have me at a little disadvantage. I don't have the list of members up, so why don't you guys go on to a question, and I'll get one of those going.
All right, Ed, you mentioned several times in your remarks about how important it is to have a really pristine LinkedIn profile, that it really needs to be something that's shining. And so what really needs to be in there? I mean, do recruiters look at, the things that you post? Do they look at your job experience? Are they looking at the recommendations? Kind of what's really critical there, and what are they really focusing on?
Well, it's interesting. I talked to who I would consider one of the best, 2 or 3 of the best retained recruiters recently about what they look for, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't slanting it just based on my own personal experience as a recruiter. And here's the thing: LinkedIn is your brand. Like it or leave it, it becomes your brand. How you brand yourself, and if you know marketing at all, it's how you brand yourself. So that's kind of number one that you have to think about. But the second part of this is that a recruiter is going to look at your LinkedIn page no different than your resume. They're going to look at that first half of your profile and above, and that better be a home run. We worry about, at the very end of the profile, but I'm going to tell you something. If that first half's not a home run, Rick, you end up losing the interest of the recruiter fairly quickly, and they don't have the patience. Sometimes, here's the other thing. I'll look at, the about section on a LinkedIn page, and there's it's this long, and it's a great story, and I know why people put it down there. I know they have, 3 dogs and a cat, and why they, dropped out of the, whatever. But what happens is a recruiter will never read all that, ever. The same 7 seconds applies, maybe less, when somebody does a glance at a LinkedIn profile. Therefore, it's got to be sharp, concise, focused, Rick. That's the biggest point I want to make on the first half of that profile.
Excellent. And one other question for you, and then we're going to definitely turn to the questions from our folks who attended today. One thing you've mentioned to me in the past, and I wanted you to kind of hit on today, was something about ghost jobs. I don't know that most people on this call probably know what a ghost job is and how to avoid them.
Well, there are some firms that will post what's known as a ghost job, and what that is, and these are recruiting companies to even Fortune 500 companies, and the places I worked, I promise you, I shut them down hard because I don't believe in them. And what it is that companies are posting positions so that you can apply, so they can actually potentially get you in their database, screen you, and build up that candidate pool. And there's no intention of hiring you at all, 0. Now, there are some people that do it, and I can name the organizations that are career coaching-like organizations that do post the jobs. They have no intention ever to hiring you ever. And it's in order to do a career coaching play to have you spend money. And there is no job. So there's a lot of bad things that are out there, unfortunately. And all you can do is apply for a job if it looks real, have that initial discussion and fill them out. And you as a candidate have a right to ask questions, and don't be timid about it. It's one of the reasons I do it. One of my most requested talks is the good, the bad, and the ugly of recruiting. This is part of the ugly part, Rick.
Yeah. Okay, Steve, we also have I'm sure we have some audience questions. Perhaps we can turn there first before we give away the book. So why don't you take it away? And
Sure. We have a question from Angela who wants to know, Ed, given the fact that people are experiencing pay cuts in their regular jobs and hours that they're being asked to work are wonky. How do you suggest they try to fit in a part-time job in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, there are people who take a job a couple of nights a week. There are people that take a job on a Saturday, maybe even a Sunday afternoon. It's hard. I mean, I wish I could tell you that it's easy, but the people that do, they do it as kind of as a precaution. But remember, doing a little bit is better than zero. So my biggest concern is that this doesn't have to be, I'm working at Wawa every night this week. Well, work 2 nights a week, work 1 night a week. But that extra little bit of income can really help you mentally, help you stress-wise, and you're contributing to the family. So that's the best way to, for me to answer that.
Sure. Steve, any other questions there?
Actually, right now we do not have any other questions waiting.
Okay. Well, I do have some others for Ed. When you talked about networking, there are a lot of folks now who probably had not looked for a job in 20 years. Maybe they came right out of college, started with their company, and now they're out of a job. They don't know how to build a resume. They don't know, how to start a network. So networking is totally new to them. So where do you begin? I mean, how do you find these networking groups? If you're not comfortable networking, how do you become comfortable networking? Kind of where do you start?
Yeah, there's a lot of people I work with. A lot of people will call me up saying, "Hey, Ed, I just got let go on Friday. Never saw it coming," and they don't even know what a LinkedIn is. In some cases, they know what LinkedIn is. They have a shell, and all it is a shell. And they say, "Hey, Ed, I don't know, how to even approach the market." And what happens is that you have to build the basics. Those 10 points that I went through, Rick, we have to start building those blow by blow. It begins with, what do they want to do next, which is always a huge question to answer, because for us, and we have 4 resume writers, and they're all working pretty hard today with clients, but we never ask to work with a client unless they know where they want to go. So first is they know where they want to go, and then we spend some quality time in their resume, and those are the 2 starting blocks. Once we do that, then we can update their LinkedIn. Where the mistake is made many times is that we rush the resume out the door. Over the weekend, the person is working on it, and they're sending something out on Monday, Tuesday, applying for jobs, kind of almost in a panic mode, and that's a bad strategy as a rule. Take some time, spend a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks if needed, have a really great foundation, and then start your job search. That's probably the best practice for someone who's starting from nowhere.
So in addition to posting your resume to those specialized job sites that are in your industry, is it worth posting your resume to, say, Indeed or Career Builder or Monster? Are you just going to get spammed by a lot of information? Can you really find jobs at, mid and high-level jobs on those platforms?
Yeah, my own personal opinion is, except for maybe ExecuNet, maybe the ladders, I don't recommend, and the specialty boards, I don't recommend posting it ever on LinkedIn or any of those job boards. And that's, generally speaking, is because you get a lot of things thrown at you that you have no interest in doing. And then what happens is that it becomes a time drain. You're spending more time reacting to something that you have no interest in, and they'd rather have you kind of take the bull by the horn and go after something that you have interest in.
Now that we're in this kind of COVID situation where we can't do a lot of face-to-face interviewing and everybody's doing virtual interviewing, what do you got to be thinking about in kind of prepping for that session? What do you have to do as far as how you look, how you dress? I mean, should I be wearing a tie or should I be more casual? I'm interviewing from my home, so how should it look?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like an hour discussion all by itself. But generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of suiting up for a virtual interview when you're at home. And now there might be an exception if the recruiter says, "Hey, the person you're interviewing with is a suit," and he or she likes suits. Then I would say, okay, I'll make an exception to that. Wear a suit or wear a tie. But wearing a formal suit and jacket and tie, I would even then say take your jacket off and just wear the tie. But only if you think that it's really needed. But the whole issue of interviewing virtually, I could just tell you for the people that have landed jobs this year, especially the ones that have worked with me, prepping for the interviews become important. Prepping for the video call becomes important. I had a client recently who got a new computer. Thank goodness we did a Zoom trial because the sound didn't work, and the interview was tomorrow. I mean, sometimes you only got one shot at this, and if it crash lands, it's a very bad image in terms of who you are and what you do. And again, don't your energy level, what you say, moving your hands, the right eye contact, don't be looking down at your notes while you're trying to talk, right? It's all those things. But I will say this: the one thing that I would encourage people to do is practice. And it's really easy with laptops. Hit record, Zoom, hit record, and then watch yourself and say, would I want to have this person, go to round two, right? And then you'll be surprised. You'll get better at it. So that's my answer.
Now, one of the things you talked about is this downward pressure on, your rates, your salaries, even consulting fees. Is there any room for negotiating salaries at this point, or do you pretty much have to take whatever people offer you at this juncture?
It goes back to foundational strategies in negotiating salary. As a rule, unless you're asked up front, what are you looking for? Negotiate, and that's not a bad thing to do, and you can negotiate upward. But once you tell somebody, I'm okay with 150 to 175, what do you think the job offer comes in at?
150.
And then your negotiating play is very, very weak. You told me 150. So now, so some of it is found fundamental to people understanding how to negotiate well, going right into a job search and what to say and what not to say. The other thing that's happened is they do not assume that all jobs are going to be less money. There are people that I know, my own clients, who actually went back to work making equal or more money. And I mean, quite a bit more money, quite honestly. So don't think it's always downward. You could still nail it and do well. But everything's got to be going in your favor, right? So,
well, Ed, we've reached our hour limit. I could go on and ask you a million questions because I know you've got a lot of great information and tips and strategies. And anybody who's listening today should definitely reach out to you and connect with you. They should listen to your radio show and certainly order your book. And with that in mind, Steve, let's pick a winner for Ed's book, and we'll send off a copy to that winner.
Sure. Our winner is Melissa Eisenhart. And we'll get in touch with Melissa and get her contact information over to Ed so he can send out a copy of the book.
So that would be great. And the other thing I want to share was that if anybody who's listening this afternoon, if you want a copy of the slides, send me an email. Just go to my website, send me an email, and I'll be more than happy to send you a copy of the presentation as a thank you. And again, all you have to do is, just put my name down, Ed Samuel, Career Coach, LinkedIn. I'll be kind of the first on Google, and my LinkedIn will have my email. My website has my email, so more than happy to help.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank our guest, Ed Samuel, and also Steve Lebetkin, our producer. I want to wish everybody on the call a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And IABC will be back in January with new events. And I invite you to check out our website, iabcphiladelphia.org, for a listing of upcoming events. You'll see some of those appearing there within the next few days. And with that, everybody, have a good afternoon, and we'll hope to see you again soon. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.